Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha.
All right. Well, good to be with all of you. I'm, as you may know, teaching from home today. A little setback with my health, so taking it easy from home here. Uh, Great to see everyone at the Dharma Center, and of course, all those at the Here and Now Center, and all of you from around the United States. Yeah, all the way out to Florida, New York. You guys are up late. Uh, all right. So we are in the teachings now, again, going through the stages of the path to enlightenment. We've on the section on cultivating bodhicitta, great compassion, the force that just um, takes us through, cuts through so many barriers, confusions. It's a motivating force. This great compassion bodhicitta, it's the essence of Tibetan Buddhist path. And we had gone through, there's typically two methods that are often taught: 7-point cause and result, which we went through thoroughly. Then there's equalizing and exchanging self for others. It's the one we're currently on. The last two sessions, we explored the disadvantages of being self-centered and then the advantages of caring for others. So it's at this stage that one would take up the teaching we're at now. And if you're new, what we've been doing is taking these analytical meditations that typically were done. Someone would go off and they'd meditate on these until they got some deep realization. Could be months and months. But the method that we're using is to unpack it in a teaching and then invite you to engage in the practice during the week. See, and bring it into your life. See if it's helpful or not. And if you find it helpful, well, you might want to keep doing it. Could be worthwhile. So uh, let's pop open the text here. Exchanging self and others. Cherishing myself is the doorway to all loss, while cherishing my mothers is the foundation of all qualities. Hence, I seek your blessings to make my heart practice the yoga of exchanging myself for others. First Panchen Lama, Guru Puja. And just to be clear, those of you new, cherishing self is very specific. It's not to be confused with self-worth, valuing yourself, valuing the rare and precious life that you have. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the opposite, cherishing self arising from an insecurity about yourself and trying to measure yourself with others and then relating your worth, based on whether you get what you want, don't get what you want, whether people treat you a certain way or don't treat you a certain way. And the self-cherishing is the self-centeredness born of insecurity that is quite damning, causes a lot of problems. Self-worth, which is what we're shooting for here, self-worth. Well, when we have a lot of self-worth, we're not caught up in all those measurements and comparisons and what others have and what I don't have and how someone treats me or whatnot. We know our value. We walk in the world knowing our life is meaningful. And this is a rare and precious human birth favorable to Dharma practice. And it has ripened for us, and it's really precious. So just understand those distinctions. Really important here. All right. Hang on, I think I clicked twice. There you go. Having compared the consequences of selfishness and altruism In the previous two meditations, it should be clear that cherishing others is far more beneficial for everyone, oneself included. At some point, you will feel ready to commit yourself to changing your attitude from being mainly focused on yourself and your needs to being attentive to the needs and wishes of others and helping them as much as possible. Hopefully, I won't cough too much. Just continuing to cultivate love, compassion, altruism, your focus shifts even further away from self-centeredness, and you come to regard others as more important than yourself. This is the meaning of the fourth point in the method for cultivating bodhicitta, exchanging self for and others. Here we are exchanging the self-centered attitude for the attitude of cherishing others. I get that. That's what we're actually exchanging. Self-centered attitude for an attitude of cherishing others. Now, it's important to remember that self-centered attitude is clinging to a sense of self that, well, you're not going to find exists. An idea of a self, a sense of your qualities, your abilities, your sense of yourself in a very independent way, which is really not how we exist. And so that becomes actually the core root of all suffering, of all samsara, of a whole wheel of samsara. And so actually, this letting go of that self-grasping, that self-centeredness, clinging to my fears, my insecurities, my resentments, my attachments, is really creating a lot of discomfort in my life, dis-ease in my life. But if I could actually know myself more accurately, I'm always in a state of becoming. I'm arising in dependence upon, myriad of causes and conditions arising moment to moment, that everything about me is interdependent. There's nothing independent here. There's not much that I'm going to cling to out of insecurity or fear. And I'll get to know a sense of self that might be much more accurate, especially in respect to always in a state of becoming. We're always in a state of becoming. So I'm not limited by my previous conditioning. I'm not limited by my views on myself, in the sense I'm recognizing, yeah, I have habits, I have conditioning that's giving rise to how I experience myself now, but I get to recognize that I get to be a participant now in planting the seeds and helping to understand myself, the world I live in more accurately, and identify true sources of suffering and true sources of well-being. And so it can sometimes, to a Western mind, seem antithetical, right? We're giving up this self-cherishing, but what we're giving up is the source of our suffering. So I can be happy, joyful, connected, participate fully in life, know that my thoughts, feelings, love, and care for others are all meaningful, that everyone I meet is really providing me an opportunity to have the life that I do. And it's such a rich way to live in that way, with much less mental and emotional suffering. So we're trading in the delusional self-grasping for a more accurate sense of self and others in a way that will provide for us to see more clearly and to use our life more wisely. All right. But it doesn't mean that we don't enjoy things, have fun. Yeah, let me make that point clear too. You don't get to go have fun, be a good parent, have good friends, go dancing once in a while. Yeah. Right. So, it's not, wow, I'm going to go have this ascetic life. No, the renunciation is the delusion of an independent self, the delusion that my happiness is dependent on whether you like me or not. And in fact, my sense of worth and value has to do much more with how I start to understand myself and life I get to live. So you can still have a lot of fun, still do things with people who can participate in all these activities, but you're just not going to have all the pain and suffering and comparisons that come along with it. Needing this to be like that, people will be like that, or get offended so much, or, you know, when you actually have a sense of self, then it's more accurate. It's, nothing's going to get offended. You're just going to see people are struggling in their own way with their own samsaric, perceptions of self. But we still put ourselves in healthy situations, don't need to be in abusive ones. We move without anger towards the healthy ones and away from the unhealthy ones. We just don't have all the baggage that comes with it. A little hook of insecurity and hurt. Just knowing, well, not healthy for me to be here. I'm gonna, might even set a good, healthy boundary without anger. Okay. So let's see here. So we're exchanging a self-centered attitude for an attitude of cherishing others. Some people naturally care more for others than themselves, even without training in these methods. Parents who are more concerned about their children's well-being than their own, doctors and nurses who work long hours, even through the night, to relieve the suffering of their patients, and rescue workers who sometimes risk their own lives to save others. With familiarity, we can become like this as well. The Dalai Lama says that an effective way to recognize the need to become more concerned for others is to imagine in the space in front of you yourself on one side and all other beings on the other side. And then you ask yourself, who's more important, this one person, me, or all those other beings who are more innumerable? Yeah, that's a method he talks about a lot, is what about all others? And if you take a little time and kind of reflect on that, you may find that kind of evaluate the world we live in based on how people treat us, whether we get what we want or don't get what we want. I mean, it's really us above all others, and don't give a lot of thought beyond that at times. Keep in mind that self-centeredness is just a transitory state of mind based on ignorance. It's not permanent and not who you are. It's best to avoid identifying with it, as that can lead to self-denigration when engaging in these meditations. So she's making the same point I was just trying to make, is you have value, you have worth. There's nothing less than you from any other being. That's not the point. As a matter of fact, when we think of benefiting all sentient beings, you are part of all sentient beings. So equalizing and exchanging an unhealthy sense of self, really, for this for this cherishing of others. And so no, self-denigration, no, being less than in that way, but rather knowing that the real affliction is the self-centeredness that's not based on who you really are, but arises from a lot of confusion and ultimately always insecurity. All right. Oops. Clicked on the incorrect button there, but I'm not going to beat myself up over it. All right. Let's pull it. Learning to be less self-centered and more altruistic may be easy for some, but challenging for others. We need to practice at our own pace and try not to force ourselves to change. As we become increasingly familiar with the meditations for cultivating bodhicitta, particularly equanimity, loving kindness, compassion, the faults of self-centeredness, and the benefits of altruism, we will notice a gradual shift in our mind. We become a little less selfish and a little more concerned for others. The practice of taking and giving, the fifth step in this method, is another excellent way to transform ourselves. And so just recognize it's a bit of a process, things to work with, try it out. And again, it's can so much be antithetical in the mind that actually this healthy way of altruism, this healthy way of cherishing others is going to improve every aspect of your life. An unhealthy self-cherishing is going to be detrimental. So, that's where we want to be very clear as we engage in this that balance is important. We need to meet ourselves where we're at. And, there's a lot of, they mentioned doctors and nurses and people in the healthcare field. Well, there's a lot of doctors. Doctors is one of the high suicide rates currently in the country, actually. Huge burnout. And so, we can be overboard with these attitudes that are being cultivated. We always need to make sure that our needs are met, that we're taken care of, that we offer our kindness to others in ways that are meaningful and productive and in balance so that we can do it for a much longer time so that we don't get burnt out. Because again, when we think about cherishing, it says cherishing others, but technically it's all sentient beings, including you. And so having some clarity that there's an unhealthy way to do this, and there's a very healthy way to do it, one in which you will be, much richer in terms of the qualities of your life and joy and your connection to others. So having a clarity with that and meeting yourself where you're at as you engage through this process. As they say in Tibetan, ki chimpo le, which means very important, very important. So that's the introduction to the practice. The meditation that they would describe is as follows. You would reflect on these points. Everyone wants to be happy and avoid suffering. In that sense, there is no difference between yourself and everyone else. We are all equal. So, having said that, everyone wants to be happy and avoid suffering. In that sense, there is no difference between yourself and everyone else. We are all equal. Is there something that's unequal about that? And my answer would be, what's unequal about that is you have been given different skills, tools, and ripened karma to learn to be happier and to suffer less than others have. So while all beings are trying to be happy, trying to avoid suffering, equality's right there. On that ground, we're all equal. However, a lot of people have not had the resources we have to understand true causes of suffering, true causes of joy and happiness. And so, in one regard, it's, the way I always kind of look at it is we're all suffering from a disease of samsara, of confusion, of misperception, of grasping and clinging to things and people in ways that, they just ultimately can't provide what we think they can. And so we're in a bit more remission from that disease of samsara than others. So what's not equal necessarily is the degree with which we are afflicted with karma and klesha. Some people are much more afflicted than we are. We've had the opportunity to create the conditions to seek, to understand, to cultivate our hearts and minds, to want to understand ourselves. Yeah, that's how we wound up at a Dharma center. And again, Buddhist path, not the only path. So you may have actually engaged in others to ripen hearts and minds. And so there are many people who are suffering less, who live a more altruistic life, and who are benefiting. But you're also going to see the world out there right now that we're living in with a lot of division, a lot of anger, a lot of hatred, a lot of us and them. And you're going to see the disease of samsara much more prevalent. And so that's helpful for me. So I don't have anger towards them because they're just have a greater degree of illness than I do. And so that doesn't make us any better. It just makes us more fortunate. So in that way, there is some inequality, right? We have some more inner resources, some more opportunities to understand ourselves, to engage in our lives with less suffering and more understanding. So in that first reflection, going back to it, I think I would add that piece that says, yeah, everyone wants to be happy and avoid suffering in that sense. There is no difference between yourself and everyone else. We are all equal. Unfortunately, so many others have not had the opportunities you have, and they're suffering more greatly than you are. For me, I think that's an important added point. Self-centeredness is the cause of numerous problems in this and future lives, and is one of the greatest obstacles to achieving spiritual goals, especially enlightenment. It's actually the root cause of, all of this mental, emotional struggle and suffering of samsara. Self-centeredness, grasping to an independent sense of self that, can really get caught up in the most smallest things in an angry and frustrated way. I mean, how many times have you just blown up over a pretty insignificant thing, you know, in that moment? It might be with a loved one, right? And then, we don't even remember it now because it was years ago. But in that moment, that self-centeredness, that self-grasping, the anger, the rage, that people should be different than they are, right? I mean, talking about self-centeredness and confusion, people should be different than they are. Like, I actually know how you should be. I mean, wow. I'm going to talk about delusional. I have no idea how you should be, for the record. And that our views on the world are the way the world should be. And so out of this self-cherishing, this self-grasping, this sense, self-centeredness is the way it's put here, self-centeredness, we actually have an idea about how others should act, how the world should be, as though that's the way it should be. Which is very different than having some preferences. Well, obviously, it's great if more people had access to education, good health care, people have some resources. I'm willing to put some energy into that. And I think that's important. And so we have preferences, and we engage in activities. I want to save up for something that you think will be useful in your life. But the self-centeredness being that I'm getting upset and angry because my partner doesn't do this, or my family members are like that, or those people that work at that place do these things, or this company does that, and all the emotional baggage that comes up as though I know how others should be and how the world should be. And, all of you have heard me say it well, I'm exaggerating if I say a million times. Many times. I don't even know who's going to call me tomorrow. How do I know how the world should be? How do I know how you should act? We're here because China invaded Tibet. And, Tibetans came out of Tibet. A million Tibetans killed. terrible thing, but also provided the opportunity for the Dalai Lama to come in the world, interfaith well, development of resources that have happened, study of compassion. So much has happened because that's helpful. So, how things are in a moment, we can be very caught up in a moment. We're caught up in a moment now, right? It's very divisive, a lot of madness here. And we forget that in our history, there's been worse times in the history of the United States, for sure. And, but we don't know that because we only know this. I used to be a history teacher. So, that the ebb and flow of humans and greed and grasping, and things that show up. Basically, I don't really know how it's all going to play out. I just have an idea in my mind, and I think that's the way it is. Then I get worked up about it one way or another instead of methodically doing what I can in my own environment to be helpful, and to do my part in a way that makes sense to me, understanding that I don't know everything. But I have some strong thoughts and opinions about things. And then I can bring those into the world. But I may meet some people that have very different thoughts. And if I understand it actually makes sense to them from their perspective, from the way they were raised, from the experiences they've had in their life, what they're doing makes sense to them. I didn't grow up like in their world and I have a different view. Well, then there's so much more understanding, peace, and ease around things when we realize that we all are seeing the world through our own subjective experience based on what we know, what news we get, what things have happened in our life, whether we've cared for it or not cared for it, things we've overcome. And so is everyone else. And so is everyone else. And we're all kind of coming together. And then when I see it as confusion, misunderstanding, a disease of samsara about what people confuse for needs and desires and wants and their views of the world as though, because they're pretty sure they know how the world should be. I'm pretty sure they're wrong. And start to go, well, what if we're all wrong? Because technically we are. Excuse me. Technically we're all wrong, right? Excuse me. I'm gonna mute. Probably should have thought to have a glass of water. So we're all wrong. In other words, nobody sees the world as it is. All right, we always see it through a subjective experience, through our own lens. And, knowing that's helpful. I don't see the world clearly. I don't see things as I don't see how things come together, independence upon causes, conditions, and a flow. And I think I'm a little more accurate than I used to be. And that's helpful. And it's pretty funny. I remember I gave this talk once. I was a monk. We were traveling somewhere on the East Coast. I don't know. I even want to say kind of upstate New York, but maybe not. And we had this whole talk where we're all wrong, and what a level playing field, and you're like, well, we're all wrong. This guy comes in and says, yeah, it was a great talk, but I just need to let you know, some of us are more wrong than others. Yeah, he wouldn't let go of that. And so that's, this softening of just recognize some of us have a little more delusion than others, maybe. Be another way of putting that. And so it's not something to get worked up about in the sense of anger and hatred, but much more out of compassion and understanding. And with compassion and understanding, we have much more capacity to improve things, to work with others, to be an example, to get things done, to get agreement. With anger and hatred, very hard. Very hard to do such things. And then we suffer as well. Okay. So self-centeredness is the cause of numerous problems in this and future lives, and one of the greatest obstacles achieving spiritual goals, especially enlightenment. Cherishing others, on the other hand, is the source of all good and happiness and an essential component of the spiritual path. In fact, it is impossible to generate bodhicitta and attain enlightenment without being genuinely concerned for others and committed to helping them. So therein lies this opportunity. Do I want to be happy? Do I want to be developing myself? Do I want to understand myself in the world I live in? And if I engage with others, if I listen to them with care and compassion, if I see every being as, as a family member, well, family members you like, yeah, side point. Uh, and that willingness to extend oneself in that way, are you going to feel better or not? Or if I evaluate everyone and everything based on my views of the world, how I think others should be, and so forth, and evaluate their value as a human being based on their misguided uh, activities. Well, first and foremost, may not help me very much in doing anything about those activities. Secondly, certainly not going to provide any sense of well-being. And so the capacity to see others as valuable and potentially really suffering allows for a greater degree of working with others, a little more tolerance, a little more understanding, and potentially an opportunity to even feel pretty good about them, you know? There's so many examples we've talked about numerous times, and I love the example of the black guy who started having barbecues for the KKK and have them come on over and just tell him, "How do you hate me? You don't even know me. Come on over. Let's have a barbecue," And just, quite a few of them became friends with him. Some left the KKK, some didn't. They're still friends, and what an example of change, right? Of capacity when don't agree with your behaviors or views, but I still see the value as a human being. And maybe there are some areas where we can do some stuff together. Like down this guy's in the South, that's why it's barbecue. And which way of living is healthier? And then this last point that's being made is if we want to really develop ourselves, we need reality. I mean, that's the liberating piece, is to live in reality, to have a direct experience of the ultimate nature of reality, of self. And what's blocking that is self-centeredness. And so as I engage in these activities of learning to care about others, first the ones that are easy to, don't go hang out with the KKK tomorrow. Start with, the grumpy old person on the corner. Or, pretty much anyone bump into that seems a little frustrating. Uh, but actually even start with the people you do love and care about. Have you called them? Have you, who haven't you called lately? Let's just start caring about others. Start with the people we know and we like, expanding that out to the people we come in contact with. Having an attitude during the day that everyone you meet is, a family member, dear friend. Uh, being able to, yeah, got mute. The way we view others, our attitude about them has very different results in how we experience them. I mentioned this I think it was at the retreat Sunday. But Laura has, watched this reality show because she's a reality show addict. Anyone who knows Laura knows that is not true. We don't even have a TV. But this particular one she was showing was so moving because people got to meet family members they had never even known about and met. And she said what was just so touching to her, so meaningful was how people lit up, when they met each other, people they didn't know, and their cousin, it could have been a father, it could have been an aunt, and just, family, right? And the hearts that open up and the way they're welcome and that union, as she said, was really moving to see how people connected. And then, the thought she's sharing is, what could we do that with everybody? You know, like what if we thought about everybody like that? And that's the attitude we want to bring, someone we didn't know before, but they're like our dear long lost, brother, sister, parent, dear friend. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's often thought of as having been your mother in some previous life, that sometimes can be harder for Western minds to grasp. So I kind of think of everyone as my mother in the sense that they all have created the conditions for me to have the life I have, you know, so that everyone who's, the people at the market, we have a market, we have food, the community, people pay taxes, I get to drive on the roads, the things that, everything I have in my life is because of others. Everything I know is because of others. So for me, I kind of think of it in that way. It's a little more tangible that I get to have the life because of that annoying, grumpy old guy on the corner who's yelling at someone. And and that's allows me to interact with those people in a very different way. So this opportunity we have to try out this week is this opportunity to start seeing where self-centeredness gets in the way of our spiritual development. Spiritual development is recognizing we are interdependent. Everything in your life is because of countless others you've never met, that you are arising moment to moment. You're always in a state of becoming. You're not stagnant. You're not limited in the ways we think we are. You're not who you were a year ago, and you're becoming. And all these temporary kind of attitudes and thoughts about oneself, well, they're temporary. They come and they go. And we have the opportunity to be an observer of these things and be in the driver's seat of our own lives and in the person we become instead of reactive to everything we experience, thinking that's how it is. I can start to go, well, that's how I'm currently experiencing it. What's a healthy way to engage with it? So being concerned for others gets us out of that self-centered view that creates so much stress, worry, fear, anger, resentment, etc. It allows for a much more balanced, healthy way to engage in the world, even if we do it a little bit. So that's going to be the invitation this week, is to reflect upon, that everyone that we meet, come across, they're all trying to find their way like we are. They're all trying to be happy. They're all trying to avoid suffering, and some have not had the resources we have, suffering a little more than we do, maybe. And how can I be attentive to? We had a whole retreat Sunday. It was great on generosity. Generous with our attention. Generous with our attention. To give people our attention, to care about them a little bit. Ask them about themselves. Let them know you see them. And see how that shifts the way you engage with others. See if it shifts your experience of how you feel about yourself and the world that we get to live in while we have this opportunity. All right. I think that's my talking. So, anyone have any thoughts, curiosities, comments, insights, rebuttals? All right, Ashley.
Yeah, it's easy to, be caring towards others when they smile back or when they respond positively. But it's a challenge when I show kindness and instead they don't respond or they respond negatively. Um, Trying to find a way to balance that because I know that it shouldn't matter what their response is, but I find myself kind of backing away when somebody doesn't respond the way I hope they'll respond. So maybe that's kind of the same thing you're saying is hoping that they're going to be a certain way. Um,
Right. That does then get a little transactional, a little self, right? I want them to respond this way or that way. And that's where, for me, it's helpful to see their suffering. It has no reflection on me that they can't smile back, or it's just their struggles. They're going through struggles. And then it's more of an opportunity for compassion. And sometimes we can wear people down. I used to do that. Some of you know I taught high school, North Long Beach, Compton border, and big, 3,000 pupil school. And man, I was just, how you doing today? What's going on? And certain people, I just wear them down. And, it's pretty hard to keep, uh, you know, hard on someone who keeps welcoming you. There were a few who are capable of doing it. But in general, it's amazing how, just having that care over time can some, but again, we let go of all that. We just see it there struggling. But we're bringing our joy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow, this is an easy night for me.
Okay. You can just speak now. Hi,
Oop.
John. Thanks for teaching tonight. I
Hey,
just wanted to share. Can you hear me okay?
yep, now I can.
Okay. Uh, for the past 3 weeks, I've been really invested in that idea of treating people as dear old friends that I come into contact with. And when you first brought it up, I think you had also brought up somebody bashing into someone else at the airport. And that person saying, "Oh, what a jerk." And it happened to me like 3 days later. Someone bashed into me at the airport. And it was kind of fun because instead of getting upset, I was able to laugh and think, we just talked about this. But I ended up sort of practicing it and then forgetting it. So I put a reminder in my phone for the next day to treat everybody as a dear old friend. And it was actually really helpful. And I've noticed such a difference in my daily life, in the entire day, when I'm walking, if I'm getting coffee, if I'm at the store. Because I find that if I feel somebody's a friend, I'm more invested in their answer, first of all. So I'm actually listening to their answer of how are you. But also if somebody is unkind or impatient, if I think of them as someone I know, I can almost find a little humor in it instead of reacting with anger right away or judgment. So that's been kind of fun to realize too. So I'm just really grateful that you've been bringing that up and how to treat people.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, yeah. And you picked up a key point is the reminder part, uh, because that's it's easy to philosophically talk about this. And even do it a little bit and feel good, but then we can forget. And so that little reminder, so helpful. For me, I have to make a few appointments with myself during the day to remind myself about, this incredible life that comes only once and how I get to live in it and just resets. So thank you for pointing that out. Okay, well, it looks like you guys are all good. You're gonna let me off the hook earlier. Uh-huh.
Wait, I have a question.
No, sorry, man. We were, yeah,
Not
Richard.
let you off the hook that easy.
Yeah, come on, brother.
I'm curious. Did the black man and the Ku Klux Klan get along at the barbecue when they liked different barbecue sauce?
That's something that I didn't get the details on. Um, my take on it was that this guy had the magic potion barbecue sauce that just melted hearts, man. But yeah, you can YouTube it and you'll find him with a whole bunch of guys and doing different things. Uh, yeah, because yeah, then you get in the whole conflict of guy used to go to Austin, Texas a lot, and everyone has like the best barbecue sauce, right? This town's known for this, and this town's known for that. Could be a conflict. But maybe it's the fact it was free food and everybody's getting along. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead now and dedicate the merit and wisdom from our time together of the many things we could have been doing on Wednesday night. We have gathered together to engage in these precious teachings that have been passed down for generations, for centuries. They've been practiced, they've been refined, there's an authentic lineage. They've been provided to us. Conditions have ripened for us to receive them. We've been motivated to open our hearts, to make our lives meaningful, to live in a way that is beneficial to self and others. So a great deal of merit has been cultivated. So I invite you to dedicate all the merit and wisdom collectively from our time together and previous in your life for the benefit of all beings. May our efforts in the world collectively find their way into the world, reducing suffering and creating the conditions for liberation. And let us also dedicate our merit and wisdom for our own continued spiritual growth, that we may ultimately recognize our own primordial nature and be of greatest benefit to all. And with that context, those who care to can join me in the formal dedication. By this merit may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare